Welcome to Post Games, a weekly audio magazine about why and how we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant, and you are about to witness me touch the most delicate of topics in video games. Video games as art. For that reason, I will need you to agree to the terms of service. By proceeding, you accept the risks that come with the consumption of conversation about art and games, and they are listed as follows. Section A. You may, in the early moments of this conversation, feel skeptical. To talk about art is to talk about the new, and the new can be intimidating and even a little bit scary. The new is alien, and upon first contact, we've yet to form confident opinions on whatever it may be. To make matters even tougher, life online has instilled us with a terror at having wrong opinions. So, the human brain often, as a method of self-preservation, rejects the new that contradicts or threatens established beliefs. The brain defaults to the proven and the safe. Therefore, to process this interview, you are strongly encouraged to proactively loosen your assumptions about art's power or its lack thereof. Within the safety of this conversation, you will benefit by lowering your shields of skepticism and opening yourself, if only momentarily, to contradiction. Section B. As the interview progresses, you may feel discomfort, particularly if you, as I do, identify as a white cisgender man. You will certainly feel uncomfortable with this episode if the mere use of the term white cisgender man triggers a renewed skepticism. And for that reference, see Section A. Section C. Before the interview concludes, you may feel vulnerable. And that's great. Art isn't purely about craft. The craft, in fact, is a means to an end. I believe great art is like a meeting point, connecting the viewer to the artist, to other viewers, to the community, to the culture, to all of human history. That magnificent power of art often makes people feel vulnerable. Understandably, the sheer scale of what art can connect us with, that's overwhelming. It makes us small, and in that smallness, vulnerable, which, at worst, can manifest, as mentioned earlier, skepticism and discomfort. It's a means of self-protection. To best appreciate both art and conversations about art, embrace that vulnerability. As my guest, artist Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley, would say, enjoying this interview is a two-way relationship. If you don't put the work into the conversation, you don't get the reward. But if you do put the effort into it, friends, you will gain access to untold riches. These terms of service constitute a legally binding agreement made between an entity and the podcast. Post Games will provide one episode about video games, a progressive art form displayed in museums and digital venues, including but not limited to web browsers. Riches as referenced in terms are limited to the metaphorical and spiritual planes. No monetary riches guaranteed. This week on Post Games, video games are art. Are museums ready? Act 1, games enter the art world. Act 2, how games help us through tough conversations. A very special Patreon bonus, a personal history of games and art and games with our guest. This is a really big, broad, and interesting interview. So rather than cut it short, I'm giving it the time I'd normally give the news of the week. So, bad news, no Act 3 news of the week. Good news, big, meaty, interesting interview. And I still have a song for you at the very end from the new game Fishbowl, and it is a delight. And you'll have to stick around to hear. Let's get to it. As a video game journalist who has been doxxed, I am constantly preaching the message of maintaining personal digital hygiene. Every person, not just journalists, should be aware of how much their personal information, phone numbers, addresses, health information, and so much more is available on the internet, and that those private details are being sold without your consent by data brokers and can be used for scams, for harassment, and plenty of other illegal activities. The problem is so big and so widespread that you could lose entire days trying to find who has your info, requesting that they remove it, and keeping these bad parties accountable. That is why I recommend Incogni. The moment you subscribe and you authorize removal, Incogni begins searching data brokers, online directories, people databases, and commercial databases. You get to watch it all happen in real time on your dashboard. When I signed up, over 200 removal requests were sent instantly. Within 30 minutes, 60 requests have been completed. That's not just a number. I could literally see the list of data brokers that had been contacted and begun the data removal process. Because trust is good, but when it comes to safety, I want to see some results. And I do. After leaving a big publisher, I needed to find the right personal data removal service. Incogni is exactly what I was looking for and has already brought me tremendous peace of mind. To get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan, go to incogni.com/postgames. That's all one word. Or click the link in the episode description box or the link in the show notes in the newsletter at post.games. Again, 60% off an annual Incogni plan at incogni.com/postgames. Act 1. Games enter the art world. Today's guest is artist Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley, an archivist whose work blends games, performance, animation, music, and visual art. Her works, like all games, are participatory, ranging from solo browser-based games to multiplayer experiences played in person at galleries. Her work has been exhibited in galleries and studios in London and Los Angeles, and will be showing elsewhere soon. In 2020, her game BlackTransArchive.com established her and her collaborators as an exciting new force in the art world. Her most recent work, The Delusion, was displayed in the Serpentine Gallery in late 2025 and early 2026. It challenged guests to cooperatively play a series of games about polarization, censorship, and social connection. We chat about both of those games and so much more. Your early work focused on archiving. Can you tell folks about specifically the Black Trans Archive and the literal and kind of less literal ways it works as an archive?
Yeah, so when we first made Black Trans Archive, the main aim was essentially to make an archive that was accessible. Something that was frustrating us was that archives were full of an amazing amount of detail, often with a very obtuse way of entering them. Everyone would want to trawl through it, but no one would really know how to get into the archive, start making it become part of their practice or just their life. So our aim was to try and build an archive which was easily playable and also reacted to you as you went through it. And something that we were looking at a lot was how Black trans people were archived at the time, or just throughout history, which is either they were not archived or the archives were kind of warnings against them. So we have an example of a poster in 1836 of Mary Jones, and the poster calls her the man monster. So it's a warning to stay clear of her. And we wanted to not replicate any of this. So when we were building Black Trans Archive specifically, we wanted to focus on how Black trans people told stories and trying to archive the way in which they told stories rather than an image of them. One of my friends runs the Transgender Digital Archive, and they have a lot of issues to do with people scraping the archives, finding an image of a trans person, and then misrepresenting it in a newspaper article or something like this. And so we wanted to avoid what we were calling at this time trans tourism. So this kind of scraping of an archive to be misused in another sense. And the way we dealt with that was to essentially make it react to you, the viewer, and get you to answer a series of questions, and that would make a bespoke experience through an archive, which more or less archived a story that we wanted to tell and archived bits and pieces of those who were involved in the making of it, but also it recorded how you thought and how you processed information. So it's kind of like a double kind of archiving going on there.
Can you give people just a brief idea of what actually happens when you visit the site so they have they can picture it?
Yeah, so the first thing that happens when you visit the site is you click begin, you watch an intro video, and this character asks you, what do you identify as? And the options are black and trans, or cis. So if you pick cis, the rest of the entire experience is now different. And so I think there's around 2 hours of footage, and the average experience or playtime is about 10 to 15 minutes. So really depending on what choices you begin to make through stuck together clips of videos, essentially, you will start making a bespoke video piece for yourself that you play. So it's very much I would say it's a series of moments that offer you a choice, and you select those choices by pressing 1, 2, or 3 on the keyboard. Most of it is animated with kind of retro 3D aesthetic as well.
This is my journalist bias showing, but when you're archiving others' experiences, what environment do you create for them? What tools do you use?
So the first thing we do when we're archiving someone else's experience is that we just have a room, we sit them down, and I listen to them for 2 hours. I don't tell them, I just ask them very basic questions like, how are you feeling? What's the world like today? What concerns do you have? Or what makes you, whatever, just very simple question. And then there's usually a group of them. So then you start asking each other questions. And my job is to just listen and not get too much in the way. And we always do that for every project. And I'm just listening there and taking it in. And maybe someone will mention something and I will say, oh, can you talk more about how faith is involved in your life? I don't really know much. I don't have a faith. So can you talk more about that, what that's like? And then after that, I will listen to that a lot and I'll start modeling a character from what this person has said in a conversation. And so it is a bit like that. Every time we're wanting to archive an experience, we start with something very grounding and human, which is just the conversation. And then I try and extrapolate that simple conversation into an entire game. So really, archiving is very small. It's just these 2 hours. But what you get out of it is this massive game. But the reason we can do that is because we're archiving, and we're not trying to archive what the person is in totality. We're just trying to do justice to what they said. So it's quite easy if they're talking about fear. Oh, I need to represent the fear they talked about. They spoke about it in this way. And so you pick some objects and items that might represent that. You model them. You create an environment of that.
You said that your more current work focuses on the mirror, which is such a beautifully elegant statement that I'm almost afraid to ask you to expand on it for fear of ruining it. But I would love to hear more about that and how it contrasts with your focus on archiving.
Yes. So I think at the beginning, when I began to make art video games, I was a lot more focused on my own experience and trying to record it and put it out there because I didn't see much of that. But as I began watching people play, my interest very much shifted to how to get the audience to feel things. And I wanted the experience when playing a game to be an emotional one. The best experiences I remember of playing games are when suddenly the kind of detachment from reality and where I am in real life break and they become one. And so what I do in a game affects how I feel about something in my own reality. As I began making more games, I started shifting less and less to everything being within the game, and it more became the game engine is the medium, but the main medium is the audience itself. And the game engine becomes more like a mediator, kind of how in Dungeons and Dragons, the game master, the person who's running the D&D campaign, their job is to react to the players and make sure everyone's having a good time, feel the emotions in the room, and tunnel down when they know they've got everyone captivated. And that's how I want to build the games. They are like reactionary, emotional machines that shift and change for the audience, rather than maybe a tunnel into some sort of escapism. It's very much the opposite. It's a mirror to how you feel. It reflects your choices back at you and asks you deeper questions that you don't want to answer. And then as you answer them, it says, tell me more, and to the point where the question it's asking you isn't answerable in the game. It's only answerable to the person next to you in the space. Yeah, so I would call it much more like trying to use the games itself as mediators.
Yeah, we're going to dig much more into that, and especially the mediators and escapism, which really surprised me about your work is there's a lot of art media that is about escapism, and I'm not trying to use this term in a derogatory way, but safe spaces. And your work is not afraid, to say the least, of getting people into a room who do not agree with each other in some pretty severe ways. So we'll work to that. But I want to dig into the games first. What do games offer you that other media lack?
It's a great question. But when you ask me the question, the first game I go back to is 1000x Resist. And that one asks you to step in so many impossible situations and actively make a decision that you might be against, but it might be right in the moment, and watch the fallout. I think they really offer a chance to explore a side of you or questions within you that you feel uncomfortable and see the repercussions of them. Often, I don't feel other media lets you play through that and go through it and go through the emotional roller coaster that can take you on and feel locked into a responsibility of what you're seeing. And that's why I find games so fascinating, because the more you play them and the more time you invest in them, the more they become about you. Regardless of what the entire game is made about, even if you're playing Minecraft and you own a server, the more you play that Minecraft server, the more it starts looking like you, it starts representing who you're playing with. And I think video games are such a beautiful medium to capture the essence of someone through the actions they make, rather than through a typical way of looking at someone.
You are enormously productive and prolific, and I don't know how you do it. So let's talk about just one game to start off. Let's talk about The Delusion, which was commissioned by and exhibited in the Serpentine Gallery in London. Can you share a brief explanation of how The Delusion operates?
Oof, gosh.
I know.
Yeah. So The Delusion operates as almost like a play. It's split up into different sections. So if you imagine a room, each room has a game in it that has a different controller. So one controller has a door in which characters come to as you open and close the door to react to them. Another controller has a table that you move, like a seance table, to move around a ball, very, very much inspired by Monkey Ball. And another controller is much like a shoot-'em-up game. It's like an anti-war shoot-'em-up where you use lance to shoot things. But everything is on a cycle. So when you first begin a cycle, and let's say you begin a cycle of hate, you will hear a series of conversations that were recorded from actual people who were of different faiths or were in different activist circles, and they will kind of talk to you about what hate is. And then the entire gallery's lights will change. There will be this light dance as well as these videos playing on the screens of these kind of 2D South Park characters, which are a merge between photos and 3D animation. And then the games begin. And the games are essentially reference setters to get you to know and think about a bunch of political topics. And so the Monkey Ball game, it's all about moving the table with everyone in the room to try and progress harder and harder levels. And as you do, you'll get fed different bits of information about, for example, hate or hope, but all to do with probably what's in the news right now, or what was in the news, or big topics of the particular country it's shown in. With the door game, it's mostly about immigration. It's mostly about controlling a border. So people come to the door, and your job is to open and close the door depending on who you think should be allowed in. There's lots of people that everyone don't allow in, and depending on what your political leanings are, you're going to let in a completely different group of people. Who you let in that door would likely change all of the games for everyone in the gallery. And in the final game, the light gun game, it's about shooting things or selecting them, things that you don't want to admit verbally in public. So that you get a bunch of options, and they're all, again, uncomfortable choices to make. So there's options like I've cheated on my partner in the past. There's options like I'm too scared to talk about war at work. But you can choose them in a way that gives you a little bit of anonymity. And once that gameplay section is over, again, all the games at the same time play an outro video, and then there's a gallery-wide kind of, let's say it's like a improv session for everyone. So essentially walks you through this, either singing together with everyone in the gallery or marching together with everyone in the gallery. It's an activity that you can do that's very low level in terms of access and low level in terms of risk. And then after that's taken place, everything turns off from the gallery and there's a single question on every screen which says, turn to the person next to you and talk about either who should be censored or why we dehumanize people. And then for the next 5 minutes, you're stuck in an awkward silence. And hopefully the games have worked enough that you actually strike up a conversation with a stranger. That's generally how a loop functions. And I would say that it's one of those works that the first time you go in there, you're like, what the hell is going on? And the more you surrender to it, the more you realize, okay, like there's a loop. I can speak to these people. I don't have to. There's lots of ways to interact that aren't just so stark of like you're playing, you're not playing.
Yes, what I really admire about it, and I have not had the chance to experience your work in a gallery, only your online work, but as a white cis man, the lens that I draw a connection to is my friends do not know how to talk to each other who are men, who are white, unless they are playing a video game. They literally need a distraction to be able to communicate about anything deeper than like what happened in the football game yesterday, which I understand is a cliche, but also a reality. And I think that there's something more universal that is seen in your work of giving people play, giving something to do with their hands, giving just that thinnest distraction makes you more comfortable to talk to each other. But then the way that you subvert that is so interesting. I do want to go back to, you mentioned answering questions like, I've cheated on my partner. The game opens, or the experience opens with the terms of service. Why is that?
Yeah, I think every work opens with the terms of service now. So at the time when I first did it, it was like a dig. It was a dig at the idea of terms of service. You're usually signing your entire life away, and they're impossible to read. Pretty much every game now really comes up with terms of service that asks you to read, and it just says scroll to the bottom and click A. But basically what we sign away in that is a lot. We do sign away a lot of data rights and a lot of just nonsense we sign away. And for me, it felt like a really good way to set the tone. Something we do a lot in art world, I don't know how much this is done in the game world, is that we do a kind of flowchart experience of the person before they get to the controller. And so you're wanting to set all the references of your game before they touch your game, so that by the time they get there, they're already baked in to thinking about some of the questions. And the terms and service are a really good way to say to someone in the gallery, forget what you knew. This is the rules of the space. This is how you can engage with it. You can touch anything. Don't be scared, or do be scared, or you will be scared. There's a lot of ways to help set some of the emotions up. And it's a lot more like filming. It's a lot more like film in terms of there's a scare coming, so you let them know it's coming by the sound, the music, the visuals. In the gallery, there's an interaction coming that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. So you let them know really early on, hey, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to speak to a stranger. You don't want to speak to a stranger. And you let them know in terms of conditions. And it's very different for each work, what the terms and conditions say. But you just let the cat out of the bag instantly, so that whilst they start playing the experience, they're thinking about that already. And I always call it like a reference setter. You're just setting a bunch of references that they can use to go through your game or go through your work, rather than exclude them because they don't have a set of references to go through it. Also, I would say that I'm not kind to the audience. Like, I think, at least in the art world, I don't know how it is in the game world, it's very different, but in the art world, often it's like the artist slaves away for hours and hours, and they make this beautiful painting, and the audience member comes in and they experience it however they want to while they're on their phone. And mine is, the thing I love about games is that you come in, the artwork just waits for you to start it. If you don't do anything, it doesn't do anything. It's a two-way work relationship. If you're lazy, the artwork's lazy. And that's what I love about games. Like, most of us have a massive backlog who play games that aren't completed because we haven't been bothered to put the work in, or we don't like the game. And I like this 2-on-2.
Yeah.
If I put more work into this game, I'm going to love it. I'm probably going to defend it, even if it's not the best game in the world. But if I don't put any effort in, I'm probably not going to like it. And some games, for example, I'm playing lots of MUDs, multi-user dungeons. If you don't put the work into those games, they are rubbish. Because they basically give you the bare basics. But once you get like a GUI and you put the map in and you download a bunch of packages, then it starts becoming an experience you feel like you've made your own. And I really like that effort. I think that effort within a game world is very beautiful.
When people see a video game, right, they typically assume entertainment. I think, honestly, like you said, that's a lot of art that they even see. Even when you go into a gallery, there's some expectation. In an interview with The Talks, you said, for me, the outside of the gallery, when you leave, that is your rest moment. That's your moment of entertainment. But in the gallery, it's work time. So what is the work?
That's a great question. I think, so whenever I talk about like what the artwork is, the artwork, and I'm always going to go back to this, is the emotional journey you go on when you make choices that are difficult. That's what the art piece is. It's being built within because basically I make choose your own adventure games pretty much in a certain way, just with very different kind of, let's say, umbrellas. And for me, the amount of choices that you have to make, whether it's speak to a stranger or whether it's identifying yourself or whether it's trying to make what you feels like the right decision in the moment. And when there's no right decision and every decision is going to be wrong anyway, that to me is the work, and is the work being done for yourself, because we always bring in references that are currently politically relevant. And that's why we produce so much work. That's one of the main reasons where I don't really like slowing down, is because I would consider the games I make very reactionary to what's ever going on in the world and what I want people to think about. Like right now, I'm doing a game about war and the environment. Two things that are very topical, but it's because I want people to talk about them and I want people to have messier conversations around them that aren't just finding their opinions online. I want them to actually find them in the space between people that they don't know and would never talk to. And so for me, that's the work. I love when you go into a space and you come out and you take a deep breath and you're like, God, okay, did I do myself right? Did I represent myself right? Did I represent my community? Like, I want you to go into the gallery and basically have to overthink yourself and then leave with an I statement. Like, I often say, if someone leaves the gallery and says, that work was beautiful, we failed. We've completely failed. I want to leave and say, I think I did this wrong, or I had this conversation with, I want to leave with a story and an I statement. And that's really helpful in terms of like letting us know if we've succeeded or failed.
Act 2, how games help us through tough conversations. I want to get more into this, the conversations that are happening here. Because you want your work to inspire conversations, not just between the audience and the art. I think that's a big piece of it, but between the audience members as a group while they're in the museum. And like you said earlier, that the game can become a mediator of sort. Can you give us a specific example of that in action through one of your pieces? Maybe something that you saw happen between guests.
Of course, there's a lot of different kind of examples. We do these kind of game performances where essentially I'm there and there's a game there and the entire audience make the decisions as a group. There's no individual decisions. You make it as a democracy, basically. And something really nice recently when we did it was the entire performance is trying to get people to have a conversation about censorship, which feels like we've had this conversation a million times, but it's topical, so that's what it's about. What happened recently was there's a trick question at the end, which asks people who they would like to censor. One answer is no one. One answer is only those who incite violence. There's one answer is only those who incite like a particular type of violence, or any of those who break like a terms or conditions that they've said, blah, blah, blah. And in the audience, there was like a massive split between censoring people who incite violence and not censoring anyone. And both of those audiences believed that not doing whatever their choice was would lead to fascism. And then so they started having an argument about why not censoring anyone would lead to fascism, and why censoring those that incite violence would lead to fascism, and how choosing who and what violence to censor can lead to fascism, and why not censoring anyone is essentially allowing fascism to fester, which was an amazing conversation that I had not thought would happen. It had never happened. I've done this piece 10 times, but was a beautiful moment which we just let run. So something amazing about a game is that when a moment happens longer than you planned for, it just continues. You just let it go. There's always space for it to breathe. And that conversation went on for 10 minutes. And I didn't have to do the rest of the performance because the conversation had gotten to actually what it was about, this tension and not knowing how to solve this issue. And so that was one example. Another example, the delusion was someone came in. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but the conversation that they had was to do with feminism. And they were a guy and they believed that feminism was squashing men and stopping men from being themselves. And they spoke to two women who were saying, this is not what feminism is. This is what feminism is. So they had this discussion coming from completely different lives of what feminism meant to each other. I wouldn't say they resolved anything, but they found a common understanding of why they were really missing each other. He understood, okay, I've actually never had a conversation about feminism with two women without it being like a versus match. And they were understanding like, oh, you've got to this perspective because of those that you've spoken to and having no representation of feminism that has been positive to your life, that has told you can do something and that you are worth something, which was really a beautiful moment and an extremely difficult conversation. So those are two examples where it's kind of worked a little bit.
I'm sure there are people listening right now who are experiencing tremendous secondhand anxiety. You have said that having to share physical space with people who disagree with you, even your like very existence, is discouraged. But you want to create these rooms. I think you said something like somebody needs to sit in a room with Kanye West and be like, this has to stop, which is a great quote. The concern that I often hear with this idea is the risk of harm. Is that something that you account for when designing your work?
Yeah, so especially in the delusion, we had a lot of safeguarding done, especially with the language in there, but also just with the team in general. Especially at the Serpentine, there was an amazing team that you have that look out for things. And they're also safeguarded too. So it's not just they're looking out for the audience, they also look out for each other. They report back to us any problems, any issues that arise for themselves, any uncomfortable moments. We also learned a lot that people didn't know how to process all the conversations, but we had a book in the back and the book was very helpful to process the conversations for them. So we had to encourage that as well, to be like, you can reflect here. There's a room we call the safe room. And they go in, it's not exactly a safe space, but it's a space for those with more social anxiety to get a thought out. Because people with social anxieties had a really hard time, obviously, having a conversation with a complete stranger. They have no idea who to speak to. But I also think, especially moving on in the future, that is a kind of work that games by themselves struggle to do, is to make sure that when things heat up, to take the temperature down and to have as many mechanisms as possible to shift, that you just can't program them all in. You don't have enough time or money. And that's why I really think this kind of merge between video games and a kind of D&D style performance works quite well, because there is a game, the base of the audience are playing the game, but my job is to react to the audience itself and make sure that when I feel a certain temperature ticking, or if someone is making someone else feel uncomfortable, I can react to that instantly. And the game just does its mechanical job of being the emotional machine. But I'm making sure to say, okay, like everyone's crying in the room. We should probably lighten the load a little bit because maybe we got here too fast, or maybe it was too dark, or this particular group of people are more affected by like the idea of death than someone else. I think it's very much about learning that when you want to explore some subjects, it's just great to have people in the room, and using the frameworks of TTRP, like tabletop role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons, as a method of mediation. I would also say that I'm the kind of person that can speak to anyone. I just have, often people say like, oh, it's not your job to speak to someone that hates you and try and convince them. And I agree, it's not my job to do that, but my job is to make work that uses the audience as a medium. So I have to get to learn everyone. It's my job to do that. Otherwise, I cannot react to someone that I don't know exists, or that I don't try and figure out to understand their mindset. Because, and this is why I speak to a lot of religious people actually, because over 50% of the world is religious. So I should speak to religious people to figure out how they think, what the differences in how they think are, so that when they're in the space, there's also references for them. And this is just how I look at it. I really look at it as the audience is a medium. So I need to learn about that medium and learn to figure out how to process these difficult moments. And what I also find interesting is I spoke to these two women in Liverpool, and they were saying lots of transphobic stuff, and they wanted to speak about it to me. They were saying, we don't really know many trans people and we want to speak to you about it. But what I found out about them is that they ran the first abortion clinic for women in Ireland to come over to Liverpool to get an abortion when it was illegal, which is an amazing piece of history. It's an amazing piece of history that they set up themselves, and that essentially have like so many women get abortions when they wanted them. And they had a perception of transness that was very much led by the little information that they had. They didn't have any trans friends or anything. But speaking to them was very helpful for both of us, because I kind of understood that you're also someone with an important history that I care about. And you understand me, that trans people aren't a monolith. So any kind of thing you're basing on one trans person doesn't really work. Just as if I was thinking about you as like, you're older women, I would never make you irrelevant because you're older women. But I think maybe that's my thing, is I just like speaking to people, and I like those difficult topics, and I like when it's more difficult. And I do think there's enough people making beautiful pieces of art that you can avoid the show if you don't want to. For me, it's okay to avoid like the hard video game or the hard show if you don't want that. But I want to offer hey, this is a hard space. This is difficult. That's what it's supposed to be. Let's see if games can handle that.
There are a dozen things that you just said that are going to stick with me past this interview, but the audience as the medium is unbelievable. It's so true, and like such a succinct way of helping me understand how video games work as an art form. I do want to talk about the ability to reach a larger audience, because people might hear this and be like, yes, all of this is good and well-intentioned outside of the guy who showed up, and I'm very curious what attracted him to this exhibit. How do people come in contact with the work, right? You still have to select to go to the museum. You have to live near it. You have to do all these things. You have to be that sort of person who's aware of it. But you have an answer for this. Some of your games are browser-based. They're available online. What is different between designing for the gallery space and designing for the global internet space, where people could just start sharing it, you know, like with a very different context, a nefarious context?
Yeah, but for me, it's about understanding the medium you're in. People often say, okay, how did you get these to work online and get people to play them? And my response was that the internet is an amazing medium, and you should study the way that artists have used the internet before. I always go to the example of ARGs, which are alternative reality games, which are games that take place over the entirety of the internet, as some of the best pieces of internet art we currently have. And often when they're in the discussion of internet art, they don't sit in the art world. They don't really sit in the game world. They sit within their own thing, because the way that people play them are essentially, you got to be a detective. You got to know it's even happening in front of you to be able to play. But for me, something we actively do is we look at older games, and I'm always saying we because I often work with a team. We look at older games as pieces of art. So we will study old internet games as an art, and we'll say, why did this piece of art work? What can we take from this piece of art that we can use ourselves? What did they do that was bad? What, like, exactly, something to learn from. And that's essentially why we started putting work online, was that it's super accessible. But that medium, you really can capture someone in a particular state. They could be at home, alone, in their room. And so you can get to a lot of more intimate moments. And so the way we design them very differently is we always ask for a piece of you as we begin the journey. It's like a very simple trick, but if you ask someone's name at the beginning of a game, and then you use that name in the first sentence of the game, and then you ask for their gender, and then you ask for their political affiliation, and then you say, now the entire experience has changed because of what you selected. There's a level of investment and curiosity in what the world looks like now because it's mine. And so we very much think like that when making an online game. We don't often think like that when making a gallery game, because in the gallery, 10 people play at once. But online, we're thinking you play at once, so you make a bespoke world for you, and we can make it more personalized by your choices. But in the gallery, it's harder for that to happen. And even if you are, someone's watching you. And so you might make an intimate choice and you might feel a bit shamed because someone's watching you. But at home, you might make an intimate choice and you don't feel the same shame. There's no one watching you. You're thinking, okay, what's that going to affect? How's that going to change what I'm seeing? What will I be responsible for? Is this correct? So that's how we think about it. But there's a lot of cross-pollination now. Often now they want to show the online games offline and the offline games online. So it's a bit strange now, but I think we have over 10 games online. We have blacktransair.com, blacktransc.com, blacktransarchive.com, blacktransrevolution.com, resurrectionlands.com. Oh God, I can't think of them off the top of my head.
The idea of the mediator being persistent was something I'm realizing now just as we're talking. In Black Trans Archive, you mentioned earlier, like it asks you about your identity, and one of the options is cis. And obviously, I selected that version. And what I found interesting is it in no way cedes accountability. Like, it immediately is like, here's your part in this. Here is the blame that you should take on. And at the same time is constantly inviting you in. It is not a like experience that is like, I'm here to shame you. It's I am here to make you aware and also to bring you into this space with us. And then when you think of mediation, choose your own adventure sounds derogatory because it's associated with like children's books, but it is asking you to choose your place in all of this and using the game as the mediation tool to accomplish that, to inspire you to make those choices. I just found it interesting how much it created a gallery-like space where I felt like I was in really good hands while being challenged in a way that I just don't associate with many games that I play on my desktop. What does a game designer's art studio look like?
Oh my
Is it
God.
just a computer? Is it a traditional art studio? What is it?
So maybe I'm so like this. I have two spaces I would like to work in. So one is like the studio. It is a mess. It is very mess. It's where everything goes out of my head, just pours out. There's pictures on every facet of every bit of walls. There's paint all over the floor. Every rug has actually been painted on. There's games all in the shelf. There's a bunch of books in the shelf. There's also 1,000 different controllers that I've tried to build and failed to build. Lots of dance mats, 3D glasses, a stack of old computers. I don't know how many computers I got by now. And little computers, big computers, arcade buttons, as well as just a million sketchbooks and pieces of paper and drawings. So I would say my studio is very messy. And that's where all the creative mess comes out. And once that's all out, I go to either two spaces. I have another space in my flat that I go to work on the computer when I want to put everything down in a more, let's say, understandable way. But I also have a space that I go to called Sybil, which is where a bunch of us art game people work. And so we all go there, and it's a very clean office space. Basically, you can go in and be very focused and being logical and make sure like clean. And in a way, I would say that I'm a very illogical game designer. I feel out the code rather than know exactly what's happening before I start writing it. I much rather play with the code and see how I'm feeling about certain sections and explore it and essentially push the paint around of the tech until a piece fits together perfectly. And then it tessellates out from that. But yeah, I would say I keep it in two halves, basically.
What is it like pitching a game to a museum or a curator? Especially, again, when you've said it's not like there's a lot of these happening right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because on the one hand, they're quite excited that it's going to be interactive. There's not many people doing interactive work. They're excited that's also maybe not just on a screen, that you also we made bespoke controllers. So they're excited it's going to be quite immersive. Like we had a table as a controller, so people really like that. But it takes a lot of work in getting them to understand where the art is. This is quite frustrating, I would say, because often they think it's a game, it's logical, there must be a correct way to experience it. And my feeling is no, like they can destroy it. If we've allowed them to destroy it, they can destroy it. They can break the game. But the galleries find it very difficult. They're like, no, we want to make it like the most accessible thing. So we will tell them exactly how to go through it. My thing is, no, like the struggle of figuring out what the hell to do, why you're doing it, is the great part of a game. It's the most fun. Yeah, I like running around in a circle in a field, even though I've got a quest to do. Like that is the most enjoyable part of it, is that like, your choices are the experience. And getting that across, because I'm always saying, that's the art piece. And they're always saying, yeah, well, what do you do? What do you do next? And I'm like, that's completely up to you. But that's, I find, is a very difficult, jarring thing. The other thing is getting them, art people who even program games, to play games as pieces of art. There's a few select creators that really do that. But this has been very difficult, getting people to actually play games and see them as art. And also you have some creators that play lots of games and see a very difference between art and art games. Some creators that play like one game, like Death Stranding, and say, oh, well, I played the art game. And other creators that like love tech and love to talk about it and are really in the theory around it and just don't touch games. They just say, I don't have time. And yeah, like that is another thing, because if they just don't play the medium, it's very hard for them to understand why you're arguing so hard on an Xbox controller not being in the show.
Where should people find your work if they want to check it out?
Oh, you can find my work at Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley .com, or you can go to any of my websites like blacktransarchive.com, blacktransc.com, and blacktransrevolution.com, blacktransair.com. You kind of get it. blacktransaWord.com. Yeah, or you can check out your galleries in your area. Hopefully I'll be having something around you, I don't know. But I also have a performance in Berlin, and I'm doing a short film right now. So I don't know, there's a bunch of places, but I think start at the websites. I always like people studying there first, and then if I'm in your area, you'll know.
A Patreon bonus, a personal history of games and art. You know how this works. This is where we split up. Patreon subscribers got something special for you. Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley sticks around to talk about the games that influenced her as a young artist. From the stuff that she was playing on video game consoles to the early video game influenced art that she saw in museums. At about 25 minutes long, this bonus section is really closer to a mini episode, a companion piece to what you just heard. I found it to be a really energizing conversation because it really captures how fast things have moved. Again, it can feel like maybe a little dispiriting that games haven't gotten the massive recognition that everybody would hope for. But in only a few decades, games as an art form have grown and evolved so much, and their ambitions have gotten so spectacular. If you're not a subscriber, no worries. We still have a song that'll take us out. So let's keep moving. Games are art. I said it. And if anybody tells you otherwise, tell them that I said they ought to shut their mouths, take a plane to London, visit a gallery, play an intellectually stimulating, albeit challenging game, open their mouths for a short but informative discussion with strangers, and then return to share a revised opinion with both of us. Next week, I can't tell you what we're doing. Sorry. Next week features a top secret interview with the creators of two of the most exciting games of the 2020s, talking about, let's just say, what's next. Alongside this mysterious chat, I'm opening the Post Games mailbag to answer your most pressing questions about video game culture. Have a question? Record a voice memo on your phone and send it to postgamesmailbag@gmail.com. That's all one word, postgamesmailbag@gmail.com. Not comfortable speaking on a podcast? I get it. Text questions via email are totally okay too. Until then, a reminder, Post-Game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Usually earlier than that, they get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got an entire bonus segment, a huge one, in which I spoke with today's guest, Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley, about the video games that influenced her career as a professional artist. And that's not all for the Patreon. Each month, subscribers get a bonus episode in my ongoing series Past Games, in which I share deep dive histories into the gaming anniversaries of 2026. The latest bonus episode tells the history of LA Noire with very special guest Tim Rogers. And no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon for only $5 at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games and get all of the show notes. Post Games logo by James Bareham, theme by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to this week's guest, Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley. Like the show, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or just share it with a friend. All of those really, really help to keep the show going. And now, to take us out, an original song. This is It's Raining Inside Alo's Home from the new game Fishbowl, available right now on PS5 and Steam. The song is composed by Pratik Saxena. I'll see you next week.